All right, we are back and we have a special guest with us today. In his younger days, in the salad days, he was one of San Diego's most exciting professional surfing prospects, competing on both the domestic and global circuits, as well as setting the world aflame in free surfing films like Daredevils 2. Real heads know. In 1999, he assisted in the formation of TransWorld Surf before becoming its editor-in-chief from 2005 to 2013. Throughout this time, he was also working as a television host, a commentator, a producer, a DJ, a roadie, working with big brands like NBC, ESPN, Fuel TV, Vans, Red Bull, Volcom, Dew Tour, Grind TV, U Media, commentating for the Olympics and, of course, the WSL. Not only is he a multi-hyphenate media personality, he's also a multifaceted talent, becoming the frontman and bassist of the band Sunbender and the host of the podcast Monday Mass with Todd Richards. He is a great skater, snowboarder, and surfer in his own right. Ladies and gentlemen, we have the one and only Chris Coté on the lineup. Chris, thanks so much for joining us today, man.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. Wow, what an intro. I'm going to write that down and put it right on my LinkedIn page after this is over.
I had to go back because you and I have the good fortune of having known you for quite a long time now, and you and I get to talk pretty frequently, but I was like, I'm pretty sure Chris has been on the podcast, but no, we've just talked a lot. So this is a real treat for me. Are you talking to me from your home in San Diego at the moment?
I am actually two and a half blocks from my home in Monday Mass HQ, also known as my office / storage unit / rehearsal space. Super fortunate to have a spot like this that close to my house. I literally walked here and it took me about 2 minutes. So I come here most days, just have a desk over here. We do the podcast right here. The band practices over there. And it's kind of like covered in, I don't know, memories and ephemera and weird photos and whatnot. So it's just a kind of fun little creative space to come into. And it also is, I guess, where Coté Media Group does its daily business. So it's an awesome spot. You should come hang out sometime.
I would love to. You know, it makes me think of, I mean, this is in the time before time when I went to school at UCSB, but we had a commencement speech here my freshman year. And the one thing I remember, well, two things. They were like, make sure you shower every night before bed, which I always felt like was good hygienic advice. But the second thing, they're like, try to have a study space that's not your sleep space, that's not your eat space, like compartmentalize. You need to be like present and meditative in each of these spaces for different parts of your life. I feel like that's what you're describing. You've got your creative space. You also have your home space. It's something I aspire to because I'm in my home office now, which is also like the laundry room, my daughter's drum room, stuff like that.
Oh, nice. Your daughter plays drums?
She does play drums. She's been playing for a few years. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
She's a very
Heck
serious
yes.
drummer. It's not like there's not a lot of style. She's very good, but she is like hyper focused when she drums. It's really cute.
I love it. I love it.
We are coming off of a pretty electric Lexus WSL finals. We saw the number one seeds, John Florence claiming a dynastic third world title, and Oceanside's Katie Simmers claiming her first world title, youngest World Tour world champion ever at 18 years young. And I think that if I pulled up the It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, conspiracy meme with the cork boards and the string, different colors, I think we can draw a direct line between your part in Daredevils 2 and Oceanside's world title. But you must have been stoked. You were there on the day. You were living it. What were your experiences being down there for it?
It was, in my estimation, the most joyful of the last three WSL finals for sure. I think that's due to a pretty varied international field. It seemed like the fans on the beach were having a lot of fun. You know, at one point I was down and literally splitting the camps, Caroline's camp, Katie's camp, and they were chanting back and forth. And there's a moment that I'm sure you will see in Inside Pro Surfing in the show that they're gonna make for the finals, where it was like I'm like a conductor, I'm standing in front of these camps and they're going, "Let's go, Katie! Let's go, Caroline!" And so that kind of just permeated throughout the entire day. And I think that the build up to it, with the pros and cons, right? The positives and the negatives coming out on social media. there was, at least in my sphere of who I see in my algorithm, there was, some negativity like, oh, it's going to be flat.
Right.
It's just, whatever. And so that just made me cheer for it so much more. I'm going, come on. And then the day comes, I was there the day before watching practice sessions, doing rehearsals, sound checks and all that. And the waves looked fun. I go, okay, if it's like this, there's going to be a win. And then the next day, actual finals day, was firing overhead, beautiful, glassy, sunny, bright blue all day long, consistent. And it just, there's something to be said about proving negative pundits wrong. And there's not, you don't have control of that really. You have control of what day it runs, of, that kind of thing. But when the day happens and the waves are that good, the surfing is that good, the storylines are that good, it's just a real, I don't know, it's a great feeling, because not only did you get to feel that enjoyment, see the entertainment, be part of that energy, but also there's that like little, I take pleasure in just a little bit of passive aggressiveness, with the online world. And so there was that kind of like told you so moment. I mean, that's a very small part of it, but it just felt really good to see everything come together. There were moments on the beach that were unlike anything I've ever seen. One in particular was Italo and Griff's match. At the end, it was over. We were waiting for a score from Griff. I'm on stage looking at the huge screen. The crowd is buzzing. There's no scores yet. And it wasn't obvious either way. It was kind of one of those maybe type of waves. He needed whatever, let's say it was like a 7 or something. And the first score came through and it was enough. Crowd goes wild.
Right.
Second score comes through, it's not enough. Oh no! It was just like this. I'm getting like chicken skins thinking about it. Within the span of however long it took for these scores to drop, it was this roller coaster, emotional roller coaster that the whole crowd was going through. And at the end of it, he did not get the score, and you felt this this kind of like heartbreak. And then that was quickly replaced by, okay, well, like, who are we cheering for now? The beach didn't empty. It was still packed. It was like, you could just see like the throngs of Griff fans kind of just go, okay, John's our guy.
Right.
And
Right,
that was mainly just due to, it was kind of like the first person that they turned to, and the number one seed. And of course, everybody loves John. But, watching Italo was, I think, a story, like an underrated kind of story of the WSL finals. I mean, the dude was he just came slashing through the field with like ferocity. And I don't think anybody in the top 3 that he beat were prepared for the Italo, one man Brazilian Storm wrecking ball.
Well, they probably should have been. I mean, you mentioned being down there on the Thursday. I was down there too, and I think he only went left maybe in that training session, and I was just like, I don't think he's fallen. Like it's and it's interesting because he's been in that finals format a few times, and I feel like he's gotten better each time. He's like learned a few things, and I think he was so impressive. It's interesting too. Like I think all the points you raise are right. Like I think that format is like built for entertainment, and it's also built for like leveling up surfing performances. I think back to like Ethan Ewing, Felipe Toledo last year was maybe one of the best like high performance bouts I've ever seen in surfing. Yeah. And then certainly this year, and I had the good fortune of not only watching John on the day, but talking to him over the weekend. And it's interesting. We talked about this on the podcast last week with Mitch, but years ago when we first started talking about format changes and being like, well, what if we had a system where you had to win in the water in the last heat of the year? This is even before the finals format came up. There was this meeting in Fiji. We brought all the world champs there. We brought all the kind of like people who finished like, in the top 5 over the last few years that were on the island. And to a person, they're all like, yeah, no, we like the sound of this. We like the idea of this. They all had different points, but John's point was essentially, Look, I've won a few world titles. I've won them before the end of the year. They mean a lot to me. I kind of want to know what I'm made of when everything's on the line. That I'm
Yeah.
paraphrasing, but that was his point. And when I was talking to him over the weekend after he won, I said, geez, like as stressful as it may have been, like I'd imagine that if you'd won at Pipe or you'd won at Teahopu or you'd won at Cloudbreak where you have a proven dominance, it would have meant a lot. But winning at lowers on that day against a rampaging Italo Ferreira, surfing the way you
Yeah.
did in front of your family, like you probably found out way more about yourself than you bargained for. And he goes, absolutely. But then he added, he's like, but if I'd lost, I would have been inconsolable kind of thing. And
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
I get it, man. I want to bring it back to Katie Simmers too, because I think you and I have talked about it. We've definitely talked about it on the podcast for years now. San Diego produces such high level surfers, and certainly surfers who have been on tour in the past, like your Rob Machados, your Taylor Knoxes, etc. Great waves, great surfing community, but it almost feels like they have an undersized representation on the world tour, at least until recently with Katie's qualification and success, than the community warrants. Do you guys ever talk about that down there? Of like, man, we've got more talent than we're showcasing on the world stage.
I mean, a perfect example. I surfed Seaside Reef this morning.
Right.
You know, Jake Marshall. There's a
Right.
top 10 finisher on the 2024 championship tour. He was out there. Levi Slaussen's out there.
Yep.
Titus is out there. Cayenne. I mean, there's literally 10 surfers out there at varying levels of the QS, the Challenger Series, and of course the championship tour. And then you have, Persidoc brother and sister duo. You have basically the crowd is just so gnarly. There wasn't one surfer out there that couldn't get a 8
Right.
in a big surf contest. So it's almost like when you're in the thick of it, you're not thinking about, oh wow, like we don't have very many surfers
Right.
on the
Right.
championship
Yeah.
tour. You're thinking like it's really hard to get waves out here because everyone's so good. But in looking back, yeah, there was a gap for sure. I mean, Rob Machado, Taylor Knox, right? Those were two of the biggest names coming out of San Diego throughout that time period. And now when you kind of look at it, Katie Simmers, who came from Oceanside, I mean, I feel like Encinitas is pretty well represented where I live.
Right.
Encinitas is pretty well represented. Carlsbad was pretty well represented, by their big name surfers up there. Oceanside had a big presence in magazines and surf videos. Back in the day, Mike Lambresi
Yep.
and Chewy Reyna, there's some great surfers on the Bud Tour, for example. But it's been a while since we've seen like that level of surfer come out of Oceanside. So many great surfers. You go to Oceanside Harbor, you go to the pier, surfers, shapers. Like the scene is hot
Yeah.
in Oside. But to see a world champion who's so young coming out of Oceanside and who really, I would say, represents that town on so many different levels. Her attitude, her style, in and out of the water, what she does, who she is, the fact that she skates, she plays music, she has this like, I don't give a F attitude out of the water that is super refreshing. And, her family is just rad. They're like they're really living and breathing like representation of what Oceanside historically has been all about in the surf world. There still is that like Oceanside High School they're the Pirates. And I know like, a lot of the guys that surf at like Buccaneer Beach and that stretch, like they consider themselves like Oceanside Pirates. And so I feel like Katie Simmers kind of embodies that new school Oceanside Pirate mentality. And it's just, I couldn't be more happy for her, of course, but also just for Oceanside in general, because it's such a soulful, rad surf town.
Yeah.
That's really underrated, I would think, just in terms of like, you have Huntington Beach, you have Newport, and all these kind of like quote big surf towns, and Oceanside's always been
Right.
just a rad surf community. And so I think it's it's amazing and it's awesome for them to get their due. And I think that that's the first of many Oceanside world titles to come in the next couple of years, and not just from Katie. I mean, there's some rising stars coming up for sure.
That's awesome. I love you outlining that crop of talent at Seaside. You know, for years, it's a little bit like the Bane quote from Batman, where it's like victory has defeated you. And you think of it when you talk about places like Indonesia or Hawaii or even like San Diego County. Like they're all different, but like they're all wonderful places to be, and like good communities, and kind of idyllic in a lot of ways. And to do the QS, to do the CS, to go on the CT, like you're living out of a suitcase. You have to leave home. And you and I have seen it over the years of surfers from different places. I always wondered if there was an element of that with San Diego, where they're like, I like being here. I don't want to leave and have to grind it out around the world. It's nice to be here. And I wonder if there was an element to that, but then lately just seeing that young crop of talent come up, the communities now have kind of people to look at and go like, oh, that model's cool. Like I want to be like that person.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, this group of surfers at Seaside Reef is like, they're not, you're not going to see them in Oceanside. You're not going to see them in La Jolla. You're not going to see it, maybe Lowers, but they really, when they're home, they're at Seaside.
Right.
And like, there's a reason why it does get crowded, but there's a reason why it's not like, I don't feel weird saying Seaside Reef over and over because it's really hard to get waves there.
Right. Yeah.
And so it's like, but in the case of like Jake Marshall, for example, this morning, he paddled out on like a big old yellow, like Machado egg thing.
Right.
And the first thought was like, oh no, Jake's hurt. But he paddles out and someone actually said it. Oh bro, you hurt? He's like, no, man, like I'm chilling. Like, so he is now
off season.
Tour's over. He's on vacation. Yeah. He's off season. He's cruising. And so that's awesome to see. You look at like Alyssa Spencer is a great example, right? So on tour, off tour, Challenger Series, any event she can do, like that hunger level. And she is, from around here, that the leader of the new school female movement that's happening in Encinitas. And there are, 6 or 8 girls probably, I want to say like 16 and under, that are so gnarly and that just get better and better like every session.
Right.
And so that's going to be something within the next few years that we're going to start to see, like the ripple effect, right? We have Alyssa Spencer kind of leading that charge,
right,
of what's possible. And then just right the next level below her, there's this group, again, the Seaside Reef crew that is really gnarly. And, you look at Encinitas as a whole in the action sports realm. I want to say like in skateboarding in the Olympics, like 5 of 8 or something are from Encinitas or live in Encinitas. And so we've always had that talent pool, whether you move here to focus on skateboarding or focus on surfing, or you're, a pro snowboarder. This is what my podcast partner, Todd Richards, calls the God's waiting room for ex-professional snowboarders.
Right.
But we also have like Mark McMorris lives here. So it is really kind of this place where if you're really good at surfing or really good at skating or snowboarding, it's an ideal situation to be in. Not only are you all inspired from each other, but you're also just inspired by the surroundings. And you really have access to every, high level, like training facility,
right,
whether it's good waves, skate parks, all the physical, like weightlifting and stuff. I'm sure you can do that around here. I wouldn't know where to find that, but I'm sure it's somewhere.
I don't want to keep bringing up Daredevils too, but there's quite a lot of gym action and some spandex for you in your segment there. So don't lie about the weightlifting in San Diego, Chris. You brought up surfboard. Go on.
1 and 2. I got the trilogy right here.
There we go.
That's a limited edition, all 3 on one disc.
I love it. You brought up surfboards. You yourself are no stranger to ripping, to recently at least repping Pyzel surfboards, as well as like Pyzel Dark Arts and a few other shapers for sure. We were on the Vissla CT Shaper rankings. We're in our second season, or we just finished our second season. San Clemente's Matt Biolis and Lost Surfboards had an awesome season, went back to back, winning the Shaping World title. But looking at the finals, there was an opportunity for not only Paisel to pick up a world title, which they ended up doing, but also Dark Arts. So Dark Arts was the sort of tech company that created kind of the vacuum bagged carbon board that Felipe Toledo won, I think it was a couple of years ago on that quad. I still think it's one of the more underreported stories in surfing, the fact that he did this. But talk to us a little bit about the dark art stuff. Talk to us a little bit about Paisel and just how that's not only impacted your surfing, but how you've seen it impact the world's best surfers.
Well, I think in my estimation, I feel like I'm surfing better than I ever have in my life. I'm 47 years old. I might not have the pop or the spring that I used to have as a young daredevil, but I really owe it to the boards. My surfing, I think, was reinvigorated by the dark arts technology, with JT and Tony and the crew down there kind of kicked off, and to me it was a revolution. I've always loved Paisel boards. I have one right here. To me, these boards are just very easy to ride. The put under your arm, wax up, paddle out, scenario always just feels really easy. And I think that different types of surfers, different types of like surf personalities and skill sets really work well with different shapers. So for me, how I want to surf or how I like to surf, the Paisel boards have always just been like really friendly to me and really easy to ride, and they just kind of do what you want. And then when you pair that with the dark arts tech, there's this additional pop that I found from that technology that really just, I don't know, it got me juiced up to really try and to really, go out there and like, I guess try is the perfect word, because for a long time, we all go through the kind of like ups and downs of like, oh God, like I'm just gonna ride a fish or I'm gonna ride an egg. I don't know. You go in and out of it. I do for sure. And so the dark arts boards got me really sparked up again on high performance shortboards. I've been riding them really small. I've started to like get a little bit more length, but I got this Paisel Gremlin board. Basically, it's like a Grom board, and this is a board that I've probably had now for 4 or 5 years. And in that span of time, it was the best, just most fun, consistent surfboard that I ever rode. And so I always kind of, anytime I would get a new board, I would put it against, it was my own Vissla Shaper rankings. I would go put it against that board. I'm like, well, like this board still wins. Nicaragua, wave pools, El Salvador, wherever in the world I went, like in waves under a certain size, of course. But this board, which was a quad, just like made my surfing life so much better. And, I think that technology paired with, I guess more openness when it comes to fin setups and all that stuff, you put all that together and it just makes the surfing experience that much more fun. Felipe's quad that he rode, like you said, 2 years ago or something, was like a revelation to me, because I always watched what Slater did, and it's a little hard to relate because he's Kelly Slater.
Sure.
But when Felipe did it, and this was like the board he was riding, that Sharp Eye looked like a board that I would want to ride. Nice, just normal outline, good swallowtail, but the quad gave it this like hot rod feel. And so I started getting fins from this company, Naked Viking Surf, and they're really like finely tuned, just radical fins. Taylor Knox rides them, so that they're going to hold in a turn. And so I basically tried to set my board up just like Felipe's was set up. Quad. This was a dark arts board. It was a Paisel Gremlin 2, and it looked similar to what Felipe was riding. And like, I just want to go fast. I want to do tricks. I want to do airs. And so Felipe really inspired me to ride a little quad. and that board I still have to this day. I have been riding like mostly quads, just free surfing and stuff because it's just so fun to go fast. And I go back and forth definitely, but the little things that inspire you, there's the idea of like getting a new board. Like I picked this board up today. This was the board that I saw probably my favorite wave of the entire season, John get.
Right.
But I think motivation is a big factor in surfing, especially when you get a little bit older. How to stay motivated, how to stay psyched, as Jamie O'Brien would say. But, just like not everybody can get whatever, 6 or 8 boards a year. If you can get maybe 2 or 3 and you can motivate yourself by like picking up a new board or trading in a board or, trading a board with your friend and just trying something different, like it's easy to lose your surf motivation, especially in Southern California when the waves aren't amazing all the time. And so little things like that can really just help. And so I don't know, like getting a new surfboard for me is always the best motivation. I'm sure for most surfers it is. Yeah, so that's like a key factor in trying new boards. And I have it's not a big issue, but I don't call surfboards equipment because I feel like they are, functional works of art with human hands, creating. Like this is just as good on your wall as it is in the water. And that's just a little quirk that I have. Like I think I said it once on a webcast, but I can't call it equipment. It's just like it's too special, Equipment's like a golf club or a baseball bat or something. This is like art right here.
I like it a lot. I loved your point on the Kelly thing too, because when I worked at Rip Curl Surf Center in San Clemente growing up, we'd get, the Kelly models would always be on the rack, and you'd have customers come in and be like, I want to ride what Kelly rides. And I'm like, no, you don't. Just like I do too, but like we're not riding that way, buddy. So like let's ride what works. I want to talk about Katie Simmers and Chris Borst. I had the good fortune of I've communicated with him a few times, met him in person for the first time at the finals, and San Diego guy, former professional vert skater, great surfer, great shaper. You mentioned Taylor Knox. He's been shaping for Taylor Knox as well. He's been shaping for Katie Simmers for quite a while. Katie is one of the most exciting North American prospects, well, global prospects. Obviously, she comes from North America. Over the last few years, I'd imagine, actually, I have it on pretty good authority, that multiple board builders around the world have approached her and her team and said, we'd like you to ride our boards. She is stuck with Chris Borst. She is her only team rider on the championship tour. The boards look fantastic. And now Chris Borst has a world title to his, I'm not going to call it equipment, to his shapes. I just think that's an awesome story. Do you know Chris yourself? And if so, what can you tell us about him?
I actually was sponsored by Chris Borst Surfboards.
There we go.
For a short time. I don't know, 10. Everything feels like 10 or 20 years ago.
Right, yeah.
A long time ago when I was like trying to do the QS and all that stuff and do magazine trips and whatnot. I rode for Chris Borst Surfboards, and I loved I think people know by now through what we've kind of said on the webcast and stuff that he's like a really good skateboarder. But I think that what people don't know is he's like a really, really good skateboarder. He was in, basically like one of the new generation Bones Brigade riders. You watch him skate a vert ramp and it's like incredible. And his boards, you can tell that they're finely tuned machines. Like he's that type of person. He's not going to make 250,000 surfboards a year, but the ones he makes are going to be special. And I think that for Katie Simmers, it's a perfect fit. Again, that goes back to her Oceanside roots. I literally just went to pick this board up, and I drove right by the, they call it the, Shaper's Alley or something in the valley of Oceanside where TransWorld Surf used to be. Drove right by Chris Borst Surfboard, Xanadu, like the lab, chemistry. They're all in that area, and it gave me a really good feeling because I'm going, this is for all intents and purposes like a backyard shaper. Mm-hmm. But when you kind of strip away the marketing or the branding and everything, I think people got to realize that Chris Borst was really one of the forebearers of inventing the shaping machine. He had one of, if not the first shaping machine in that Oceanside surfboard alley. He was super early on that, and helped kind of create that whole new realm that we all get boards off of now. He was one of the early guys doing that. And the idea that he's only got two team riders that I know of, Katie Simmers and Taylor Knox. I mean, those are two surfers that really lean on the rail of their board. They surf really clean. There's no, there's no additional movement in how they surf. And so the boards really fit perfectly to that style of surfing. And I don't see Katie Simmers switching anytime soon. I was standing there at the finals. Katie won. Chris Borst, I was like right in the middle. Chris Borst comes out. He's crying. He's so happy. Obviously, Peisel was the same way. He was crying too. John Peisel will cry, just so everybody knows.
Right.
But for Chris Borst, I mean, Peisel's had multiple champions. He's got multiple surfers on the championship tour, a bunch of surfers coming up. But for Chris Borst, I mean, you can imagine he's making boards for this phenom. It's a 12, 13-year-old kid from Oceanside. And then to kind of see that rise, it really is like the Peisel John story in a way, because Peisel, he had just a couple riders.
Yep.
Back in the day. One of them just happened to be John Florence. So I think they have elevated each other. I was reticent to stop by and say what's up to Chris Borst, because I'm sure right about now he's pretty busy making a lot of surfboards. Because who wouldn't want to ride one after, who wouldn't want to surf like Katie Simmers? So it's just another layer that makes being a surf fan right now, in 2024, so fun.
Yeah.
Because there's just such rad storylines, and they go way beyond just heat wins and title wins. It's just like these layers that we can kind of peel into and look into that make being a surf nerd entertaining and fun, and just gives us all this awesome stuff to talk about. So I love the rise of the underground shaper. Like I'm not going to say backyard, because he's got a factory, it's super high tech and all that stuff, but he's definitely an underground shaper. And I'm sure a lot of surf fans around the world, they're looking at Katie's board, they're like, who made it?
Right.
Like,
Yeah,
where's
right.
the logo? And so that logo now is going to be definitely more well known, and Chris is going to be very busy.
I love it. We are going to take a quick break to get a word in from our sponsors. And when we come back, we're going to wind the clock back on Chris Coté. We'll be right back.
Oh, no.
All right, we are back. This is the Lineup Podcast. I'm Dave Prodan here with Chris Coté. Chris, we spent a good chunk of our opening segment rightfully celebrating and platforming and lionizing the San Diego community. But talk to me about your upbringing, like born and raised there. What was your family like? And how did you get into surfing and skating and writing and music? What was your upbringing like?
Basically, I'm like 2.5 blocks from where I grew up, and I still live there to this day. I live across the street from my brother, and my mom lives over here on all the same street. So I feel like I've just extended my childhood all the way until my adulthood. And, growing up, my stepdad surfed, my brother surfed, everyone around us in the neighborhood surfed. I would see in my mind, they were just the coolest people in the world. We had two brothers in our neighborhood, the Ortega brothers, Jimmy and Jason. We had this really amazing surfers all around, and fortunate enough that I grew up in the same neighborhood, so I could just I knew them.
Right.
Oh my, this is like the coolest person in the world, and they surf, and so the neighborhood that I live in is in Leucadia, part of Encinitas, California. And it just always has had this kind of cool, laid back, low key surf deal. And so in the early 80s, it was like you were I was boogie boarding probably till junior high school with just friends from school, heavily influenced by Paul Roach. We were going drop knee and trying. And then in junior high school, my brother was a sponsored surfer, competitive surfer, very young age. Him and Rob Machado were like sparring partners throughout junior high and high school.
We can
He was
shout
riding,
Justin out. Justin also
yeah,
won
Justin
a
Coté,
QS event in Puerto Escondido and was when I
yeah,
met him
Mexi Pipe master.
he is online editor at TransWorld Surf. I love Justin. Anyway,
Yes.
go on.
Yeah, so he, you're always going to be influenced by your older brother, of course. He had sponsors, body gloves, stubbies, bubblegum surf wax. He always had rad surfboards, and I was fortunate enough to get the hand-me-downs. But the first the first thing that got me hooked was actually in your area, Ventura Point or C Street. I was bodyboarding, my brother was surfing. It was like waist high. It was, for some reason, it was a left. We were going left. I know it's a right-hand point.
Goofy footers can find lefts anywhere.
Yeah,
like, I'm
we're
with
going,
you.
and I think he was just like, "Here, ride my board," because it was really small, and I've always been a small wave enthusiast. And I remember taking off and standing up, and I did a cutback, and I was like, "Oh, that's what I want to do." And so from there, I started applying myself. I was never into big waves. I was never into like trying to, charge, but I was super into tricks and trying to go fast. And my skateboarding and surfing kind of started at the same time. So when we were skating in front of the house and stuff, we would call out who we wanted to be. I'm Aki.
Right.
My brother and I would fight over who would get to be Aki. And so we would surf skate and stuff. And then, from there I started actually like skateboarding early on at Del Mar Skate Ranch and parks around here and in the streets and stuff. So kind of surfing and skating were at the same time, and that's kind of where I'm still at today. I love them both equally, and I'm probably like equally as good at both. But throughout like junior high school, I'd say I was kind of like a late bloomer. I was on the high school surf team and stuff, but I really started excelling in surfing probably senior year and just past senior year. I was sponsored by local brands and stuff. Trevor Christ's Obnoxious Youth brand sponsored me because I was extremely obnoxious as a youth. But it was one event in Carlsbad. It was like a little surf, shop contest. And it was just one of those days where I was on and I was just going crazy. And I got scouted by a guy named Jeff Moore for Team Ezekiel. And this was my first real kind of proper sponsored deal. So I got sponsored by Ezekiel, through Ezekiel, Breaker Out, Pesh surfboards, Castell shoes. Like I had the sickest setup on my board, getting tons of boards, wetsuits, started going on trips, doing, big events, Coldwater Classic, US Open, had some successes there, started getting in magazines, getting in videos, that kind of stuff. And so it kind of got to a point where it was like, okay, you're getting paid to surf.
Right.
Winning contests. I won a contest in Japan and stuff like that. But then my big, ugly realization was when I got sent to Hawaii the first time.
Right.
The sponsors, they're like, "You're going to Hawaii. You need to figure out where you're going to stay and all that." Like they bought my plane ticket.
Yeah.
So I was sleeping
probably
on the
that
floor.
time you're like, damn right, I'm going to Hawaii.
Yeah, I'm going to Hawaii. Watch this. And I was scared.
I've seen North Shore. Yeah.
Yeah, I was already scared trying to surf, Seaside when it was big or
Right,
in front of my house. And so I don't know what I was thinking, like if something was going to change. But I do recall I got there. I had a hitchhike from like Wailua to Rocky Point. I go, okay, Rocky Point, that's where the people get photos. And my first session there, I was paddling out, brand new board, bright, wet, the whole deal. And a guy was getting barreled on a little wave coming out, and I go, woo! And he pulls out and he starts screaming at me, big Hawaiian guy. Roadblock was his name. I don't know if he watches this pod. Roadblock, I'm sorry.
He writes in all the time. Yeah, no.
He was a really scary, big local who at the time I didn't know anything. He's screaming at me to go in. And then I go, okay, of course. And I start paddling in. Somebody else is paddling
Yes, sir.
out, another huge guy. And he sits up and kind of in my way, and he goes, "If you go in, never come back out here. I'll remember you." And I was just in the middle of these two guys, and they're yelling at each other. And so, thankfully, a set came through, and I just let the whitewater like smash me all the way to the beach. So that was my first Hawaiian experience, and I go, okay, well, that was scary, but at least the waves didn't destroy me. And then the next day, I went back, and it was proper 6 foot, and I'm just sitting on the beach going, what are my other skills? What else can I do? Because this is not for me.
Where's
And
that guy
so,
who told me to go in?
yeah,
Where'd he
yeah,
go? Where's Roadblock?
exactly. And so basically, I was going, all right, I need to figure something out because I'll go back, I'll go home, I'll go to Salt Creek, I'll try airs, it'll be fine. And then, I think I had obviously I had, you know, energy, and I wanted to be a part of it, and I was pretty likable, fun to be around, I guess. And so my value was in my personality, and I surfed all right. And so I remained sponsored, even though I knew I wasn't going to go and make the championship tour or anything. And through that, getting in magazines and kind of adding value to what I brought to the table. Like, look, let me go on the trip. Give me one photo doing something. I'll write the story. I'll help however I can get this thing in the magazines. And so that kind of added an incentive for sponsors or magazines to bring me along on photo trips. And then through that, working with, I had a mentors kind of at the time, Rick DeVoe, uh, Paul Gomez, guys that really liked me, and they kind of saw that I had something to bring to the table. And so I started working as a team manager in marketing departments for Billabong, Hurley, Reef, Arnett, all these companies. I basically volunteered time to Wave Action Magazine to write video reviews, profiles, whatever. I filled my truck with magazines, did distribution, just whatever. I did
Yeah.
whatever I could to be a part of the world that we're in. And so, again, from there, just raising my hand for whatever job, I'll do it.
Yeah.
And so I I want to say 97 to 98 ish. I was just working at a surf shop, kind of like riding a BMX bike, uh, more on the kind of party deal
Hmm.
with my friends. I go, look, I just want to hang out. I want to have fun. And I was working at Hanson Surf Shop. I was the worst surf shop employee, but because I was likable, they kept me around. And so I got a call in 1999, myself and Blair Marlin, super agent now.
Super agent.
We got a call to help start TransWorld Surf magazine right here. I just picked a random issue off the rack. We got a call to help start this magazine, and I was super excited about that. I had some articles in Surfer magazine, Surfing magazine, Wave Action, a couple other publications, but this was going to be kind of my first time getting a real job, I guess, like a big boy job.
Right.
And so I started as contributing writer, then I was associate editor, all the way to editor in chief, from 1999 to 2013. So through that time, I started Cotay's Cube.
Yep.
It was a pre-podcast on our website, which was, at the time, the websites were, if it's not good enough to be in the magazine, let's put it on the website.
Right. Yeah.
And then that started a switch. So basically, we had a bunch of pros and stuff coming to the office, and we would take photos of them, and I would do a quick interview with them in my office, Cotay's Cube. I would compose my own theme song and all that. And through that, I started, TransWorld would sponsor big events, the US Open. And
Yep.
so basically I said, look, we're going to sponsor this event. You have to put in the contract that I get to be an announcer. I get to commentate the event. And so basically I wedged myself in there, didn't give the ASP or a choice. And so that kind of got me started. US Open was my first kind of big break, I guess. And I almost blew it a few times by being a little wild. But through there, Fuel TV came around. I became one of the hosts on the Daily Habit. These are my shows. Matt Keckley.
There we go.
Who we got?
But
Yeah, JP
the
Walker.
U.S. Open was actually probably the perfect vehicle for you in a lot of ways, because I think that's such an interesting, like your background's so interesting from the like generalist specialist conversation standpoint, right? Where it's like it feels like over the last 15, 20 years, it's like in any discipline, like whether it's sports or entertainment or music or whatever, like it, like everyone or careers, everyone is so hyper focused on a singular thing. They're like, I cannot do anything else but this singular thing. Otherwise, I'll lose a step and I won't be the best. But you lose so much. Like when talking about your background, it's like you surfed, you skated, you're into music, you're into this, you're into that. And something like the US Open that isn't just a surf event, but it's a BMX event, it's a skate event, it's a music venue, it's a cultural kind of happening. It almost feels like that was tailor made for your like high level generalist skill set as well.
I fully agree with you there. I mean, I was quickly when it started to grow and get to its biggest heights, I would be announcing heats, and then I would go to the skate park and do hits from there. Try to sneak into the skate park and skate myself. I think the biggest it ever got was when Modest Mouse and the Faint played one of the days,
Oh yeah.
and I was the music guy, and so I got to announce the bands, and it was epic. I mean, I remember one point looking out, and from the pier to, I don't know, river jetties,
Right.
it looked like there was people all the way there. And I was with, fire marshal, or whatever, and he's like, go out there and, chill everybody out. And I go, okay, I can do that. And so I got to do so many dream jobs within kind of one job. And I've always been thankful and have looked back at the US Open and still, this was the first year that I didn't announce it because I was coming from the Olympics. And so
Right.
it was almost like FOMO. I mean, it's a gnarly gig. It's full on for, now what is it, 9 days?
Yeah.
So
It's a
it's
marathon.
a radical gig, but it's also it's fun, and I never surf better than the Monday after the U.S. Open wraps, because you've been watching
Right.
the
Yeah.
best small wave
Right.
surfers in the world in waves that I can surf, and by studying R&D that entire 9 day frame, the Monday after is, I feel like I'm on the Challenger Series.
Right.
That wears off after a week or so, but that's the best I surf all year, is the day after the U.S. Open.
Yeah. You mentioned before, I mean, you've said you're 47, I'm 41, so we're not too far apart in age, but like kind of the idea of like, I just want to be a part of this scene. And like, similarly, like working at a surf shop, like writing for Surfing Magazine, writing for TransWorld, working at the ASP. For everyone has a different reason for why they want to be part of it. But for me, it was like, I kind of want to get away from my situation, which wasn't particularly bad. I was just bored, and I'm like, I want to run away and join the circus. I want to have a good time. And you and I have talked about in the past, like that's a kind of a life adventure, but at the same time, there's also risks and you can overdo it. And, we've talked about sobriety in the past. Can you talk to us just a little bit about that as well? Because at some point it's like, man, I have to kind of get a hold of, not even if I'm out of control, I just kind of have to level out so I can keep doing this, so I can keep living.
Yeah. I mean, I grew up in a time especially in the surf industry, skate industry, whatever, that 50% of it was partying.
Yeah, that was
You
a
surfed and you
currency, right? Like you're like,
skate.
I can
Yeah.
party, and people are like, come with us. You're like, oh wow, all right, I guess this is,
Oh
I
yeah.
can, you know,
Yeah. And then I think the peak of it for me was, I didn't drink. I was sober till I was 21. My first drink was on my 21st birthday, and on that night I go, oh, this is awesome. This is so fun.
yeah,
And so I got real into it real quick. And it definitely followed me. It hurt me in a lot of ways. I know I lost jobs from it. I know I, burnt bridges and all that, but I also know that in certain kind of areas, and I hope this is like, it opened doors, right? It
no, yeah,
opened backroom doors, right? And through my tenure at TransWorld, I really got in with a fast crowd. I was on endless trips with Bruce and Andy. I was,
Yeah.
right in the thick of it. And I think at that time, it's like being an undercover cop or something. It's like you got to earn the trust of
Right.
of this crew, and I admittedly became really, close friends with the surfers that we were covering, and it was probably not the best uh, scenario journalistically.
Hmm.
There was a lot I could have written about that wouldn't have wouldn't have been. It was never worth it to me. Let's just put it that way. It was never worth it to me to air dirty laundry. A, because I love the positive side of life. I love that, how good they surf. They're wild and they're crazy, but the dark stuff, I just never. I'm like, what am I gonna gain, right? I'm gonna lose friends. I'm gonna, hurt these people's career or feelings to sell a couple more magazines. Like, that's not worth it to me. That's why it's like, if you read the stuff that I write, I'm not going in these deep dive hardcore journalism, like air the dirty laundry of the
Right.
world's best. Like, that's not me.
Yeah, it's
And
not
I don't think
page 6 kind of stuff.
yeah, I don't think
Yeah.
our fan base at the time, they just wanted to know how much fun everybody was having. They wanted to know who's doing the best airs. They wanted to know, like the personalities of these surfers. And so, I kind of approached it like that. And I was called a groupie a couple times. I was called, like, why don't you
But that, I mean,
spill
that
it?
almost predates like today, and not just in surfing, but like it's access journalism, right? Where it was like, well, if I do X, then you don't get anything, And I also
Yeah.
think too, I think back to when I started, and again, it was a little after you, of course, and I think probably well before you started, it was even more Wild West. But it was like a traveling circus for adults. Like, it wasn't. Everyone was kind of like, oh my God, like if I can keep this up and I can convince someone to fund me traveling the world to be a professional surfer, the prize money at the time's not much. Like, you're not saving for houses or a normative life. You're like, I'm here to party, like, in a way, and at whatever level you want, and that was
Yeah.
kind of the vibe in a lot of ways, where it's like being a professional surfer is the excuse for me, or working in professional surfing, working in the industry is the excuse for me to be at the circus.
Yeah. My friend TJ, who I picked that board up from today, he's going on a boat trip. And I was thinking back, I was going, oh my gosh, in our heyday at TransWorld, I would go on 1 or 2 boat trips every single year, go to Tavarua 1
Yeah.
or 2 times every single year. Like, it was insane. And the fun that was being had obviously was, showcased in TransWorld Surf. We didn't hide the fun that was happening.
Right.
And to me, it's kind of rad because, when I first started going to the North Shore as a surfer and then as a magazine guy, I got to see the real gritty, radical, underground, hardcore North Shore.
Right.
And those are memories that to me are absolutely priceless. And I love that lore and those stories are not, they're not necessarily available for everyone. It's almost like you have to know, you would have to have been there. You had to have, been on the 3rd floor of the Volcom House or in the basement of the, the Jerry House. You had to.
There's nothing in the middle. You're either at the top or subterranean.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Right.
And so it kind of, it puts you in this sort of club, right? When you see somebody that you remember hanging out with from back in the day, it's almost like just a look, you go, yeah, we know, dude. And at the time, you didn't know how fortunate you are because you still go to the North Shore and it's still wild and it's still cool, but the vibe is very different in a good way.
Yeah.
It's like, it's.
Well,
I was
gonna ask. Now that we're both older, do you look back and it always cracks me up when people are like, I've got no regrets. I'm like, man, I got billions of regrets. Like, I'm like, what? It's like I didn't live like a perfect life. Like, when you compare, and I think people like to treat it like black and white, where it's like it's either got to be this thing or that thing, and you got to be on that team or that. I think there's so much more nuance in it, where it's like you can look back and be like, I'm very thankful for those memories. I did not behave perfectly. It was not all perfect. Now that I'm older and I'm a father and I've had all this life experience, like I wouldn't encourage that again, but it doesn't mean that parts of it weren't special,
Oh yeah. No, the the good and bad stuff that happened to me is part of my core identity, or my
Right.
core memories. I hold them in a special place,
Hmm.
you know, because I just don't think a lot of these things happen anymore. Getting those scary phone calls in in mid-October
Hmm.
at TransWorld Surf, when your desk phone would ring and it was an 808 number,
Right.
you're like, uh-oh, this is going to be bad. So you pick it up and it would inevitably be someone on the other line going, hey, so I know you guys are coming over, but what kind of shots do you have of me around the office? And you go, oh, yeah, I'm sure we got something. And you hang up and go to the photo editor and go, we need a shot of surfer
Just
A and
Coté's
surfer
list.
B.
It's like, there
Yeah,
we
so
go.
just please, can we get, and more often than not, it was warranted because we did have great shots of them, but
Sure, yeah. But
it, it, it felt so good to go to the North Shore when you knew you had some aces in up your sleeve of like, oh, hey, buddy, we got you. Here's your spread, That made life a lot easier past 10 p.m. on the
it
North
is.
Shore, that's for sure.
The North Shore cracks me up because even hearing your story about when you were younger and you went over there as like an aspiring professional surfer, and I've experienced this on a much, much lower level, but like almost every non-Hawaiian based surfer at whatever level has a version of the same thing where they're like, oh, like I thought I knew what surfing was until I went to the North Shore and I was like, we're not doing the same thing. Like it's a huge realization of like, holy crap, this is like a different world. And I don't know what decade are we on? Like 1940s, 1950s. We're at like 7 decades of like it started out as the mecca for high performance surfing. It still is today.
Oh, yeah.
Um, it's
It's the proving
incredible.
ground.
Proving ground, no
It
question.
proved me wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it
It
actually
proves a
proved
lot of
me
people
right.
wrong.
I was like, no, I knew this about me. And I was just
Yeah,
like,
exactly. Yeah,
yeah,
same,
right.
same. I'm like, oh, what
Um,
job should I get in the surf industry? I'm
yeah,
sitting on the
okay.
beach
Anyway,
at Pipeline. I'm like,
Malachi.com.
sweet.
Yeah, right. Yeah. One of the awesome things, about my life in the surfing world is getting to meet people like you because we're not that far apart in age, but like, I've joked about Daredevils too, hugely formative, but also when you were at TransWorld, hugely formative. Guys like Steve Sherman and Peter Terrace and like writers, Joel Patterson and people. It's like, man, that was really, really something. One of the awesome things that I think made TransWorld stand out, and I want to get your take on this because I have a feeling that you were kind of the galvanizing force behind this, was the videos and the films that you guys produced. Things like Burn, things like High Five. I'm probably missing a few. Drive, I think, was in there.
Surprise excitement party.
Surprise Excitement Party. Like, these were like, obviously there's a lot of films going on. You can look at the Taylor Steele stuff. You can look at the Matty Jai stuff. You can look at the, Logan Doolian stuff. Like, all this stuff's happening. But like Surfer Magazine and Surfing Magazine, which are the other two major publications in the U.S., because Water with Zaldini as well. But like, they weren't putting out films as well. And I think it's one of those real interesting characteristics you have. Like, ahead of the time with Cotay's Cube, we're going to make films. I feel like you had your distinct thumbprint over the soundtracks too, which are awesome. I feel like the Matty Costa, Dane Reynolds one from Burn was particularly formative. But tell me about that part. Am I off, or were you kind of a driving force behind these films as well?
I mean, we basically were a skateboard magazine that had
Mm,
surfing in it.
right.
And TransWorld Skateboard, we were so fortunate to be in the same building as TransWorld Skateboarding and TransWorld Snowboarding.
Right.
They had set the blueprint, right? Every year, TransWorld Skate would they the formula that we kind of took on was, okay, so they would pick 5 or 6 skaters, the legend,
Right.
the up and comer, and kind of everything in between. And great music, good editing, just a good package, right? And so we basically we're going to do that. For I would say there was probably 4 or 5 in a row that I really had my hand in. Tomorrow Today was the first one that I really
That's what I've
worked
seen.
on hard.
Yep.
I guess I was a producer on it, a director, whatever. As a team, we picked the surfers. That one was like Dane Reynolds, Bobby Martinez, Yaden, and oh man, some other great surfers. And pick those 5 surfers, get them on trips, get footage from their filmers, and I was obviously very passionate about the soundtracks.
Right.
I'd pick the music. Our graphics team, our art direction team was always super rad about like how they laid it all out. And so that one was kind of the first one. And we used this cool rotoscoping technique to kind of make them into illustrations like the AHA Take On Me video. So that was the first one that I was really kind of heavily involved with. And then it went into, I want to say High Five and Surprise Excitement Party,
Right.
Tropically Yours. I might be missing 1 or 2 here, but the whole thing was to show the best high performance surfing by an assortment of kind of characters. This one was Andy Irons, and the stories. This is Andy Irons, peak highs and lows right here.
Yeah.
This video gave me a lot of anxiety, but it also was an absolute thrill to work with Andy on this. He had a 2-part.
Yep.
I think it's his best video part ever. Is a 2-parter.
Yep.
He was surfing to Drowning Men.
Yes.
And Future Islands, I believe.
Yep.
And to me, it's his best surfing. It was really varied as well, like kind of all over the place. Who else? Wade Goodall, one of my all-time favorite surfers.
Just on the Andy part, because I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
Like that, and I was gonna. This is in my notes, so I'm like, yep, it's the Drowning Men. Yes, it's Future Islands. Like the timeline on that, I might be wrong, but it does feel like one of his final, if not his last, kind of video part.
It was his last. It was his last proper video part.
Yeah, and that segment, as you said, it's a 2-parter, and it's got 2. I mean, it's so loaded because of how emotional the time was, I think, for everyone.
Yeah.
But that massive carve he does, I think it's at Karamas, he's wearing the green board shorts on his forehand. And it ended up in like ads everywhere. But that, like, I don't think I've ever seen a turn like that. And then, as you said, it's 2-parter. So you get all, like, as a fan, you're like, oh my God, this video is amazing. I got Andy kind of end segment. It goes quiet. And then it opens back up with him at Deserts. And I think that's the Future Islands part. And the soundtrack's amazing. I'm getting kind of like chicken skin just talking about it. But he just, as you said, it kind of features the highs and the lows. And you can see it in these segments and like how emotional he is just to be surfing and to be doing the surfing he is. Like, it doesn't feel like he's doing it for the camera, I guess, is like the most beautiful thing I can say about it.
Yeah. Yeah, and we got footage from a lot of different people from all over the place, and fun. Andrew Doheny, Fergal Smith, like it was people from all over. But the fun part about this movie is we were trying. I do, and not just because I'm director, producer, whatever. I feel like these movies were very underrated,
right?
Because of the tone of them. They're fun, they're silly at times. This particular film had, I think, 32 wild Easter eggs.
Right.
And that was a contest that we did where you got to watch the film and find all the Easter eggs. There was, a part where Andy Irons is driving in a barrel at Desert Point, and there's a guy standing on the reef, and Jerry Ricciardi and Steve and Dave Malcolm. I basically just told him, I'm like, hide weird stuff in here.
Right. Yeah.
One example is like Wade Goodall is on a wave and he goes like this and his hand is huge.
Yeah.
Andy Irons is getting barreled down the line. There's a guy standing on the reef like fishing, and he's got 8 hats on his head.
Yeah, he
Just
does the kick
random,
out and like the
yeah,
seagull grabs him. Like, yeah, it was cool.
yeah. Oh, Let's Surf Seriously was the other one I was
Oh,
thinking of.
that's yeah, right,
But
yeah.
we had so much fun making these movies. It was gnarly for the editors. It was gnarly for the guys that actually I would go in a couple times a day and a couple times a night and be like, sweet, that looks awesome. Oh, that wave's not great. Oh, like that song's perfect. Or
They're
and
probably like, oh, it's the ideas guys back. Okay,
get
great.
out of here.
Like,
Yeah,
right.
you do it. But
Yeah,
yeah, we had so much fun making them, and then the idea of, oh, awesome, every year we get to go and put on a surf premiere. We get to go to La
right.
Paloma. We get to go
Yeah.
to Lido and Newport. Get everybody together, and that to me, I feel like this was a really underrated part of TransWorld Surf, and the movies still hold up. I mean, they're
Oh, they're
so
awesome.
fun. They're so
Yeah.
fun to watch, and that was just to me it was a dream, right? To be able to, because I always I helped Taylor Steele with some soundtracks. I helped Dane Reynolds with some soundtrack stuff early on, and but to be able to kind of have the final say, right?
Yeah.
Here's the song we're using for so and so. This song is incredible, and it is always, it was always underground artists. It was always stuff that we could get cleared. And
Right.
if you kind of look back at some of the Transworld movies, Future Islands is a great example. No one ever heard of Future Islands before we put them in a movie. Not that we played any part in making them popular, but we were way ahead of the curve there.
Right. Or
And
part
I
of the
think,
constellation of their ascent too. It's
yeah,
like they have to turn up somewhere, and it's like, what do they
yeah,
say? Like scarcity is the mother of innovation or something. I fucked that up. But
totally.
you know
And
what I mean? Like, but that's
yeah,
kind of the point. Like, you have to use what you got.
yeah. And Transworld was always super heavily influenced by music.
Mm.
You'd come to our office and we're all blasting music from our desk. And, we had two music review pages in every single issue. And for me as a music head, I had the best situation ever where every single day I would go to my little mailbox and I would have 15 envelopes.
Right.
Open them
Right.
up. What's this? Oh, what's this new band? Interpol. Cool. I'm going to listen to that. Oh, what's this? And I would have my 2 stacks of CDs, the ones that I was going to listen to and check out, the ones that I knew I wasn't going to like. I'd take those straight to the record store, sell them, buy music that I wanted. And so that was a huge driving force behind the magazine, was all the music that we had access to.
Yeah. We got to take another break to get a word in from
Let's
our
do it. Let's take
sponsors.
a
We will
break.
be right back. All right, we're back. This is the Lineup Podcast. I'm Dave Prodan here with Chris Coté. Chris, I said it during the break. We could talk for weeks on end, and I wish we could.
This is part 1, right? Of
Part
6?
part one of like the Star Wars. So actually, we'll say this is part 4. We'll do 4, 5, 6,
Or the
1, 2,
prequel?
3, and then we'll go from there.
Oh, perfect. I'm in.
Yeah, right. Um, we're in 2024. We talked about
Yeah.
you being a multi-hyphenate media personality. We've talked about, and I agree with you, I think so much of this is underappreciated or was underappreciated in its time. You've been so far ahead of the curve on media. I think that the surfing world over the last 5, 10, 15 years, whether it's the industry, whether it's the media, whether it's the sport, whether it's whatever, has been so stratified in a lot of ways. And I think a lot of that's good. Like, I think gatekeeper culture is not always a great thing. But what you kind of lose in breaking that apart from, 20, 30 years ago is you kind of lose that center of gravity in terms like, well, what are we all talking about? And what's important? And what should we be paying attention to? And how can we break through the kind of siloing of like, these people feel that thing and they only talk to each other, and these people over here feel that thing. And I'm wondering if you've experienced that in sort of the modern age. I'm wondering if that is part of the onus for doing Monday Mass, because you guys talk about so much rad stuff. And I'm kind of wondering where you think the next steps in surf storytelling are gonna end up.
I just feel like surfing is so joyful, and it's so fun, and there's so many aspects of it to be involved with. It really is for everyone, and there
Hmm.
are so many. I mean, I'm really going cliches here, but there's so many branches to the tree
Hmm.
that there really is something for everyone, not just to do, but also to talk about. And I think that through podcasts and through vlogs, we have access to kind of what we want to be a part of, right? You
Right.
have, oh, I want to be a purist log rider,
Right.
so I'm just gonna focus on that. I want to do airs. I want to ride my Slater design quad, my Dan Man. I want to do that. I want to, big waves, whatever it is. So you kind of can pick the little elements of things that you want. But how I view it is I love it all. I want to know about everything. And I think that's a huge reason why I started the Monday Mass is because not only did it kind of keep the tools sharp between
Mm.
events, you keep talking, getting reps in of saying words about surfing, skating, snowboarding, but also it kind of gave me an excuse to really nerd out and you know look at all the websites, look at all the Instagram posts. I try to see everything, and there's no way you can be on top of every element of surf, skate, snow, or whatever. But I just feel like nowadays we have this menu. You don't used to be. There's only Surfer Magazine,
Right.
and maybe Surfer Magazine is going to do a story about longboarding and a story about Tom Curran, Wendy Botha, or whatever, and you're like, cool. I'm just gonna flip past that. But now it's just like, what is that? What's that Tom Cruise movie? Minority Report, where you
Oh,
can just
right. Yeah. Oh, right. Yeah. Right.
you
Yeah.
pick anything you want, and you can go as deep as you want into all of these elements and nuances of surfing. So it just makes it so fun it's the best time in the world to be a surf fan.
Hmm.
And it used to be kind of corny to say that. I'm a surf
Right.
fan or I'm a surf nerd. It's
Right.
like it's cool now. You can start a debate. I'm sure in the comments here, there's going to be debates. You can go to someone's Instagram. You can go to WSL's Instagram and just put one thing and be like, start a debate. Here we go. And so I think we just have so much more access. We have access to all the pros. You can DM Jack Robinson. Hey, what board were you riding at Margaret River in 2017? Like not that he's going to answer, but we have that
But you can do
access.
it. Yeah. Right.
You could maybe, oh, I can do it. I mean, you could maybe go to the OP Pro, and maybe, if you're so lucky, Tom Curran might walk by you, and you might have a chance to like say hi or get an autograph. But now, you can go to Surf Night in San Clemente, and you get autographs from all the pro. It's like it's just there's so much more access, and there's so much more information. And trust me, I love surf magazines, but I feel like now I can pick up, if I want to look up anything, you know, any surf stat, fact, whatever, it takes 30 seconds. And so it's just a really great time to be a surf fan. There's so much to love about surfing, competitive surfing, soul surfing, longboarding, foiling, whatever you like. It's very easy to be involved and to be entertained and to know what's going on in all the parts of the surf family tree that's happening right now.
Yeah, no, I think that's well answered. Before you go, we did put out a feeler for questions from the Instagram community at the
I know
Lineup
them.
Pod. You do know them. Well, it's like we just talked about. If they want to ask Chris Cote a question and they know you're coming on the lineup, or vice versa, Monday Bass, they just hunt you down. First question is from David Bailfuss, who asks, "You have a reputation of being a very positive person. What do you think gave you this trait?"
I guess I was probably born with it. I see that because I also see it in my youngest son.
Mm.
And I think a lot of times when you try to figure out, well, why am I happy all the time? Why am I so positive? And I kind of look at him and go, okay, I feel like this really is something you're kind of born with. But also, I just feel fortunate all the time. I'm driving down the highway in Cardiff and I'm looking at the hill and I'm looking at the lagoon and the ocean. I go, oh my God, I get to live here. I was running, I was jogging with my board from my house to the beach, and halfway there, I'm going, oh, I get to walk to the beach. Like this is, I'm constantly blown away by the good fortune, and like I complain about stuff, I'm sure, but for the most part, I have a pretty quick ability to turn things around. Today, I had a horrible session, but I was going, you know what? There was waves. I got some exercise. I got to see a bunch of homies that I haven't seen in a while. So there's way more positives to bring than me digging rail and blowing my first wave and like ruining my session. So there was like 90% positive, 10% negative. So I just kind of put the negative aside and I go, oh, these are all the rad things that happened in that session. So I guess part of it is being born with it, and part of it is working on it. You know, it's not like blind positivity. It's really being able to just think about the situations and all the just good fortune that I have. I have no right to be pissed or bummed out because life is great.
Yeah, the kid thing's funny. Like I never thought about it until I had kids, and
Yeah.
then you're like, oh, I should
Oh yeah.
I should figure out more about myself if I'm gonna like rate
You
like
are born with
oh,
these things.
oh,
Yeah.
okay. Good question. Great answer. Second one is from, we know this guy, Mitch Tales. Mitch Salazar
Oh,
asks, what's been your personal, excuse me, favorite moments that you've called on air?
favorite moments that I've called on air. I mean, Kelly Slater winning a pipeline.
Mm,
That was I I in the past couple of years, the commentary team has become a little bit more regional. I get on my share of events, which I'm always stoked for. In that particular year, my good friend, my homie, the best announcer surfing has, Joe Turpel, got hit with COVID like
mm,
a week before, and I got the call in, and I go, I'm going to use this opportunity to do the best work I could possibly do, and the best thing that could have happened for any storyteller or any commentator, any journalist ever was the goat starting early on. We didn't really know how the waves were going to be.
right.
So Kelly goes out and he starts making heats, and we're going, is this really happening? And then history happened. I was almost crying the whole finals day out of just pure joy to see this go on, to hear my voice on some of the waves that he was riding in replay after replay was huge for me. Again, so fortunate that I got to be there and see that. Calling events at Pipeline with Jerry Lopez, Dave
Mm,
Wassel. Those the early Vulcan Pipe Pro events were incredible. Every event that I ever did on Tavarua or in Fiji, Tavarua at Cloudbreak, memorable. Coach Coté, which sticks with me for a long time, was a great memory. And I think as far as like the words that I've said, probably one of my best moments was I think Felipe Toledo won in Brazil, and I had written this line down the day before the finals, basking in the golden glow of victory.
mm.
And I remember Googling and I go, I'm sure someone said it in some sport in the past, but for me, I'm like,
Is this
did
mine?
I,
Yeah.
did I just make this up? Basking in the golden glow of victory. I said that out loud, and I was very proud of that. So
I like that.
it's the best job ever. I mean, if I didn't have this job, I would be sitting in the parking lot down at Seaside or at D Street or something talking about surfing. So the
Right.
fact that I get paid to do it and I get to talk about the best of the best, it truly is the greatest job ever. I love it.
I kind of wish that we were at a time where like if Joe Turpel gets COVID, he has to go into like isolation, and doesn't actually know what's happened. And then after that event, he's like, "So what happened? Did anything important?" You're like,
What
"Well,
happened?
like,
Yeah.
yeah, no, that's a good answer."
I
Uh,
definitely I draw inspiration from all the whole commentary team, and I'm like, no matter where we're at, who it is, it's like I try to get better by working with them and kind of listening and studying what they do. It's fun.
yeah.
Did I
Last.
mention it's a great job?
Oh yeah, that's the right answer.
Keep me
Last
around,
questions
WSL. Let's
from
go.
at. I mean, this podcast couldn't hurt. Last question is from Avant Surfwax, who asks, "What do you do to warm up your vocal cords before going on air? Irish wristwatch. I had to look that up to make sure it wasn't something naughty. But I'm like,
What is that?
What are the kids doing these days?
Sounds
No,
kind
but
of
yeah.
sus, but I like
It does, yeah. But
What do I do to warm up? I remember I've asked, so I've been on tour with my band and
mm,
blew it and just blew my vocal cords out. And for the last three shows, I had no voice, and that came from partying, staying up all night.
right.
And like tried honey, because your voice is really it's a sensitive instrument, especially when you use it for 9 hours a day, day after day after day. And so I asked, like, the guys in the band Switchfoot. I've asked Salema Mesekela. I've asked, uh, you know, like Jim Vance. I've DM'd like high level announcers and said, what can you do to ensure that you will have a potent voice for an extended period of time? And the best answer, or the most common answer that I've heard, is sleep,
Mm.
rest. Like, you can't stay up all night and then go announce an event all day. Trust me, I've tried and I almost got fired because of that. Um, it's just kind of like, I guess, easing into it as well, because in my band, there's a lot of like yelling, and it's you just kind of have to treat your voice with the respect it demands. There's some sprays that you can use, drinking a bunch of water. I think like coffee, alcohol. Obviously like cigarettes and smoking and all that stuff is not going to help your vocal cords. But in terms of just like the basic warm ups, I feel like for the most part, adrenaline and excitement is
Mm.
is the warm up, knowing
Right.
that if you're announcing like a Grom search event all the way up to the WSL finals. It's like I draw energy from what I'm watching, whether it's a skate event, a surf event, whether the waves are horrible, whether the waves are perfect. I get energy from the passion and the effort that the athletes are putting into what they're doing. So I think respecting their effort and respecting their expertise and their livelihood
Mm.
gives me energy. And so it's kind of, knock on wood, rare that I like lose my voice during an event.
Mm.
I felt it, and then the event ends and it's gone. But
Right.
somehow the energy that you get, you're like, this is what I do. I'm on camera. I gotta speak. It's got to be clear. And so there's almost like energy reserves that you can lean into. But for the most part, it's just like rest, water. I mean, that's probably kind of a boring answer, but that's what I try to do. I go to bed if I'm at a surf event, I usually go to bed at like 8:30 or 9 p.m. because you're up at 4:30 and you're going to be talking for 9 hours.
Early
The Olympics
mornings.
was totally different because I was going to bed at 6 a.m., waking up at 3,
All right. Yeah.
announcing from 7 to 4. So there's curveballs thrown at you, but yeah, just rest and, I don't know, get excited, and you can talk about something you love all day long.
I think that's a great answer, and I hope Jim Vance was like sleep, but also can you connect me to Jack Robinson?
Yes.
Um, Thanks to everyone that wrote in at the lineup pod. We're now down to our final segment for part one of the Chris Coté conversation. It's time for the lightning round. So these
Oh
are
yeah.
10 questions for you to answer as quickly as you can. First question. If you could only have one board set up for the rest of your life, single fin, twin fin, thruster, quad bonzer, or finless, which would you choose?
Thruster.
Coffee or tea?
Coffee. Panicking coffee and tea, but coffee.
Burrito or pizza?
Pizza. Sorry, don't kill me, San Diego.
Last book you read?
The last book I read, I'm reading Eric Larson book right now about the Civil War. It is an audiobook, so
That counts.
uh, Daniel Johnson, Train Dreams. I try to read it once a year. It's my favorite book.
I feel like you and I are hitting like
Dennis Johnson.
American males in their 40s that become history buffs. We're like, oh yeah,
Yeah,
a Civil War book.
yeah.
Everyone jokes about it, but it's a real thing.
Oh my gosh. Eric Larson
Best
all day.
best surf film ever.
Best surf film ever, Beyond Blazing Boards or Runman 69. Can I have two?
You can have both. I'm into it.
Thank you.
Both are great choices. What is one wave you never have to go back to?
One wave I never have to go back to would be wow, I want to go back to every wave. I would say there's a reef break in La Jolla that I went straight over the falls and smashed my face on the reef pretty bad when I was younger, so I probably won't be going back there.
Did that. Did that. Got the tattoo. If you
Yep.
could only get to, if you only get to surf one wave for the rest of your life, and you can dream cast it, perfect conditions, just you, your buddies, whatever, what wave would that be?
Macaronis.
Hmm. Best person to share a lineup with?
Best person to share a lineup with? My brother, Justin
Great,
Coté.
great choice. Worst person to share a lineup with?
Worst person to share a lineup with? Any surfer on the championship tour,
That's a common answer,
because
yeah.
they're really good at surfing, they're really good at paddling, and even when they're trying to be cool, the waves just seem to go right to them. Even when they're just minding their own business. I think when you're that good at surfing, the waves just kind of go to you. But they're also the best because it's so inspiring, but at the same time, it's the worst because you're like, I was just right there, or why is he 50 feet that way? Like, that's not where you're supposed to take off. We're all over here.
It's always cracked me up, like when we were touring and people are like, man, you must have the best time surfing. I'm like, are you nuts? Like, it's just like, it's like the Thunderdome every time you paddle out. And I'm like, I also don't
Yeah,
want to get in anyone's way. It's nuts.
exactly. Yeah. Don't, I remember being on a surf trip. Actually, that's funny. This trip right here, and Dustin Humphrey was the photographer.
Yeah.
And I remember somebody gave me Andy called me into a wave,
Right.
and I caught the best wave of my trip, and I pulled out, and the photographer's like, "Bro, don't drop in on the talent. You're not here to get photos." And I was like, "Oh, yeah."
He told me. Whatever. Last question. Finish this sentence. I will next achieve a state of happiness by.
I will next achieve a state of happiness by going surfing on my new board and doing at least one good turn or one good little air. That's my next. I mean, even closer to that, in 5 minutes, when you hang up the phone, I'm gonna go jump in the water. Just we call it in my family, we call it a quick dip. Run down the stairs, jump in, get out, go back home. So that gives me happiness because it's hot in this Monday Mass HQ. So that's my next. Yeah, that's an easy one. Jump in the water.
I love it. Chris Coté, thank you so much for coming on the lineup, part one, of course. And man, I appreciate everything you do, everything you've done for surfing. I
Thank
think
you.
you've left an indelible print on surf culture, and we're all the better for it, man. So everyone listen to Monday Mass, and yeah, man, I appreciate you.
Appreciate you.